This is a no BS guide to writing fully realized three-dimensional characters that feel real. Sometimes I think authors or writers overcomplicate their process of writing characters by making these really long character profiles, or maybe they're too simple character profiles. But I kind of like to do something I call the yin-yang method, which is basically where you have your yin traits, which are half, like it's like two halves of one whole. So your exterior traits would be the yin and your interior traits would be the yang. So for example, for exterior traits, which would be how they present themselves to the world on the outside, would be things like their base personality, manner of speaking, appearance, occupation, abilities or talents, relationships, and vibes. And then your internal traits would be how they are actually on the inside, which often does not match how they are on the outside because, real people don't always act the same way to new people that they would to people they know closely. And even to people they know really closely, they might not act the way that they are on the inside. So that would be things like their goals, their fears, misbeliefs, aka their internal conflict, beliefs, trauma, coping mechanisms, backstory, experiences, love language, likes/dislikes, contradictory traits, and flaws. So to start off with our exterior traits, you would have base personality. What I mean by base personality is that often this is like surface level personality without getting into like backstory, like why they are the way they are, plus contradictory stuff. So like on the outside, your character might be all like happy and optimistic or whatever, but maybe on the inside they're like struggling with something. That's kind of what I mean by that. And that can really come in handy when you have that sort of dichotomy with that, and that could be really cool conflict. Manner of speaking is also really important when writing character voice, because you don't want your characters to all sound the same. So their manner of speaking could be like their accents, whether they use slang, how casual or how formal they sound. Maybe they sound very polite. Also, the way people talk can really key in on how they are as a character and maybe like what they believe in a little bit. Like some people who are more informal, or if you have a character that's like more rude and informal, I guess, they would talk more casually than a character who's more, I guess, well-mannered and polite. Appearance, this one seems very basic, but what you can often do with appearance is you can have things on the character that key in on how they are, or like you can have things on them that can give you hints of their backstory of who they are as a person. Like, for example, maybe a character has a scar and that makes you think like, how did they get the scar? Or like, were they in a fight or something? It's a really cliche example, so maybe don't use that one, or even just like some really unique thing that they accessorize with that maybe most people don't have. Like maybe they wear some really goofy hat and you're like, that's weird, I wonder why they wear the hat even when it's hot outside. So, things like that. Occupation or role in the story, even if it's like a fancy world, maybe they're like a merchant or something, and even that can really give details or an idea of what the character is like. Something that's interesting is that if you have a character that's a certain role, maybe they can describe things the way that, say, someone in their job would describe things. Like if you have someone who's a baker, you can have them, I guess, see the world in a way where they describe things like how they would describe things in the kitchen. Like they could compare the smells and scents from outside to what they know when they're baking, and that could be interesting. Abilities and talents, that can really key in on information about the character. There's also just a lot you could do with that, because even if it's not a fancy world setting, like maybe your character is just really good at drawing, that alone can give you ideas of like, okay, they're very observant, they're they might be a little introverted or something like that. Even just the way they draw or the type of artist they are or whatever type of hobby they have, even if it's a really niche hobby, that can really add intrigue to the character. Or if it's like a fantasy world and they have some elemental power or whatever, that can kind of give you an idea of maybe do they like their power, or maybe they feel like it's a curse or something like that. In Avatar, for example, the main characters have these elements that kind of fit with their personality a bit, which is kind of cool. For relationships, that might seem kind of basic as well, but it is important to kind of establish your main relationships, especially the ones outside your romantic relationships. Like, how is this character's relationship with their siblings or their parents or their friends or whatever other characters there are, so that it feels more than just your romantic interest. Vibes, this one's kind of hard to explain, but like, what vibe or feeling does this character invoke, I guess? Like, if you were to create a theme song or a playlist for your character, what type of vibe of a song would they be? Or what imagery comes to your mind when you're thinking of them? You kind of gotta feel it when you listen to music. It's a little hard to explain, but yeah, that's kind of what I mean by vibes. As for your yang, which is your internal traits, this one can get really interesting because this is where a lot of the internal conflict comes from. That being said, the reason why I split these into yin and yang is so that they're equally balanced, so that the characters aren't solely defined by how they are on the inside or the outside, and it's a combination of those things. Like, for example, they're not fully determined by their trauma or their backstory, and also not how they present themselves on the outside, as like maybe on the outside they seem like a trope. So kind of I'm trying to avoid that whole situation. And it is hard for me to find characters that are fully realized in both categories. Like, sometimes characters might feel fleshed out internally, but on the outside they're kind of tropey, or maybe the other way around. First off, we have their goals. Like, what is most important to them? What do they want to achieve? They could have their main goal in the story, like stopping the bad guy, but they can also have a more emotional driven goal, like, I want to open up to people, or something like that. So, and then you have, of course, your internal conflict, which is also your fears. Like, what are they afraid of, and why are they afraid of this? It can be rooted in the past, through their trauma, or it can just be something silly, or it can be a more recent thing in the plot. Goals and their fears need to be at odds with each other, and it needs to be kind of like pretty much the more ambitious the goal, the more fearful your fear needs to be in order to like make it feel like a really big conflict. And often your character doesn't really realize they're afraid of something, or maybe they do. So, because characters are not as self-aware, which is okay. There's a lot of people who aren't as self-aware either. Misbeliefs. Often characters are very much not aware that they have misbeliefs. For example, these are often related to trauma, like maybe a character who was abandoned or whatever thinks that they can't trust anyone, or something along those lines, which can really mess with them and make getting their goals way harder than it should be. But that's great, because we need that for internal conflict, so it's good to have those in there as well. On the other hand, you have their legitimate beliefs that are true, or what they think is actually true, I guess. Usually more positive than their misbeliefs, but like, say, maybe they really believe in, I don't know, this is a really basic example, but say they really just want to protect everyone, and they believe being a hero means to protect your loved ones, even if it means sacrifice or whatever. And that could be like a driving belief they have that can really give you a sense of what the character is. Obviously you should probably have more than just that belief, but like a main core belief is really good to have. And then trauma, I mean, it doesn't have to be a really big trauma, it can be like smaller, but some terrible things should happen in their past or in the present, because otherwise it's not gonna feel as interesting. coping mechanisms, like, I don't know, for example, maybe they run away at the first sight of danger, or maybe they lash out when they feel trapped, or something like that, and you can explore how they got this way, or what happened in their backstory to make them feel like that. Seeing that grow throughout the story can be very satisfying. As for backstory, we got that backstory / experiences. And ideally, if you do backstory, you should do more than just the tragic part that changes their life or the tragic part that gives them trauma. Because it'll hit harder, trust me, if you include happy moments in their childhood before that happens. Not only to have a balance, but also so it feels more fully dimensional, that childhood. Love language. Even if you don't want your character to be in a romantic relationship, you can still have a love language in like their platonic relationships too. And I think that's interesting and telling of how a character acts with others. Or you can get really unique or creative with love languages. Like, say someone's love language might just not even be the 5, it can be something like food. Like, that could be really funny. Or I guess that can fall under like giving someone food. I guess that's gift giving, but it can be silly or something like that. It doesn't even have to be like your typical ones. Likes / dislikes, not on the same level as beliefs and misbeliefs. It's more casual things like maybe their favorite food, favorite color, whatever. Probably more significant than that maybe, unless it has some relevance to the story, but usually more casual. Their dislikes can also be very telling as well. Could really key in on like, oh, why do they hate this so much, sort of thing, and that could be really intriguing. Contradictory traits is also really important because most people in real life are not consistent. Even if they're solid internally and externally, they will absolutely have contradictory traits because we're all a little hypocritical. So like, for example, maybe a character who believes that they need to save everyone to feel like a hero, but at the same time they also refuse to save the bad guy because they hate them or whatever, and that kind of goes against what they said. But just things like that could be really interesting and really makes them feel more human. And then the last thing that makes them feel more human are flaws, because everyone has them, and having flaws in your characters really can not only humanize them, but make them feel more relatable. And it also honestly kind of makes you like them more. Often some of my favorite characters or most well-written characters I've seen have flaws, and that really is like a subtle thing that really kind of makes them stand apart from other characters because they just feel more real. So it's very important to give your characters flaws, and like actual flaws that can, like, it's okay if the audience is mad at your character for a few chapters because of said flaw, like that's fine. You can still like a character and not agree with what they do or what they say, or like even hate a part of them, but like it kind of makes them feel more real. As a side note, you should present your character's personality first through their actions, then through dialogue, and then their beliefs, and then lastly through exposition or backstory details. So basically it's showing how your characters and the viewers learn more about each other through their external traits first, rather than like just dumping their personality or their internal traits, because this is more akin to real life. Like when you meet someone, you learn about them through their actions first, and then goes down the line. They don't usually reveal everything about themselves firsthand. So that's really a good thing to keep in note. Consider how your characters are going to act differently around different people, even besides like how will they know them. Even if they're just as close with certain family members as their friends, they're still going to act differently with the friends versus the family members. So keep that in mind as well. Realize that your atmosphere / descriptions play a larger role in your characters than you might think. By using background details, your audience can glean more from your character. I don't mean like backstory dumps or outright saying things, but body language, their character voice, how they describe the scenery. That is what really immerses you into a character. And it's also why having a strong character voice and really getting attached to the character is the really big thing. Because no matter how pretty your prose is, if you don't care about your characters and what they go through, even if they suffer a lot compared to a book where they don't suffer as much, but you actually care about them, it makes all the difference. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in my next video.